Okay, hi everyone. I'm Dennis, this is Julian, and today we're going to talk about hacking Bluetooth audio devices, or more specifically, hacking headphones. Just quickly, who are we? I'm Dennis, and I'm a security researcher and a penetration tester at the German security company ERNW. And I started this research together with my colleague Friede, who unfortunately cannot be here today. And later on during the research, we were also joined by our disclosure lead, Julian, who will talk a bit about that topic later on. So let's get right into the topic. If you remember back in the old days when you were listening to music, headphones looked basically like this. So you had some sort of cable and you had to do all of the cable management, and some people preferred that. But at some point, vendors started removing the headphone jack and also started selling additional devices without cables, which were a bit more expensive. But that sort of became the new standard. So now these cable-less, wireless Bluetooth headphones are basically the new standard, and everyone's using them. So that means Bluetooth headphones are basically everywhere, in cafes, on trains, in offices, or in gyms. And there's one very central point in that, and that's this love relationship between the headphones and your phone. Or if you want to put it more scientifically, there's basically a cryptographic bond between headphones and your smartphone. And a smartphone, in this case, could also be something else. So it could be a tablet or any computing device that connects to the headphones to play music. So, well, what are people using headphones for? Well, obviously to listen to audio content like Spotify, Apple Music, and podcasts and whatever. Something else people are using it for is just phoning people, telephony, doing voice messages, listening to voice messages, or sending voice messages. And some people also use it for voice assistants like Siri or Google Assistant or Gemini or whatever. So let's imagine we have an evil pair of headphones. What could this evil pair of headphones do? So, well, for one thing, obviously, it could listen to your content, like your music and your podcast. But what it also could do would be to record your microphone and listen to your conversations and the sounds around you. You could also listen to your calls. They could even make calls and access your phone book. And they could also maybe act as an input device. Well, no, that's actually not possible anymore on most modern operating systems, because this profile switch from headphone to keyboard device is something that has been researched into before, and most modern operating systems just prevent this. So that's something they wouldn't probably be able to do. But all of these capabilities sound kind of interesting, and they basically led us to the question, can we make a benign pair of headphones evil? So basically, can we turn this into this? And we did some previous research into Bluetooth before. In this case, it was Bluetooth Auracast, which is also related to Bluetooth audio. And we had this basically random pair of headphones lying around, and we thought, well, maybe just start with these. And typically, when you want to start research on an IoT project, there are some things you want to start out with. So, for example, the device firmware could be something interesting. So you're looking into the firmware, analyzing the firmware, what does the device do, but also like identifying debugging interfaces. And we didn't really get a grasp on these headphones. We also didn't just want to open and break them, but fortunately, we also had the corresponding sender device for this headset. So this is basically a Bluetooth Auracast sender or a transmitter device, and for this device, we had a firmware update file. But not only that, we also had a tool, a PC configuration tool, that we could use to configure this device via USB. So you could configure like the name, you could set an encryption password for Bluetooth Auracast, and you could also do firmware upgrades. So that's something we wanted to start out with, and we connected the device, started the PC tool, and then just started Wireshark and dumping USB communication. And it basically looked something like this. So at the top you have a lot of USB audio, which is not surprising because this device can do audio and transmit audio. But something that was very interesting to us were these large number of packets that were USB HID. And essentially, USB HID is something you can use for building custom protocols on USB, and that is exactly what we found here. So we did stare at this file a while and looked into packets and tried to make sense of what we could see there. And at some point we identified some sort of protocol. So there was like some kind of preamble, something that looked like a command ID, and then some data. And one thing we found when we looked at the communication and the firmware update file was that there were packets that contained parts of this firmware update file. So this is probably the protocol message that handles updating the firmware. We also found quite a few other command IDs that followed basically the same structure of that. But we wanted to understand more about that and wanted to understand what this protocol can do and how it works and whether we can use it to also read contents of the flash. So we put in the firmware update file into Ghidra. It wasn't as straightforward, but that's not the important part here today. And we found these command IDs that we've been observing in the Wireshark traffic. And so here, in this case, there was the command ID, and we found that this command that we've just seen with parts of the firmware update file is actually something that just writes to parts of the flash. And we also found another function in like the proximity of the writing function that allowed us to read flash. So we started building a tool that basically implements this protocol, which seems to be called raise. And yeah, we found the read command, we implemented the read command, and we were successfully able to dump the flash via USB HID. So now we got the whole contents of the flash, the whole firmware of this transmitting device. But the cool thing is this also worked for the headphones. So now we could obtain the whole firmware for the headphones and could start looking into them. But these were, as I said, just some random pair of headphones, like not like a big brand. So, you know, we wanted to make this more interesting. So we were wondering, are there any more prestigious devices? Unfortunately, no, not these $9,000 Bose diamond-crusted earbuds. I have no idea who buys these, but they exist. So one thing we did was we tried to look at the devices and look what they have in common. And what they had in common was they both used an Airoha SoC. And then we thought, well, maybe there are other devices that use this SoC, so maybe we can identify other devices that we can read flash from. And we did some research, and I'm going to go into that topic a bit later on. But we found that there's quite a number of fancy and also flagship devices that have Airoha chips. So we thought, great, that's cool. We can buy a fancy, expensive device, dump the flash, and then start research on that. So we bought the device, we plugged in the USB cable, we started a tool, and damn it. So the device we bought didn't have USB. And well, we were wondering, the transmitter had this PC configuration tool for firmware updates, but there's not really a PC configuration tool for these headphones. How are they getting updates? Well, turns out there's an app for that. And so we downloaded the app for this specific pair of headphones. We started the firmware upgrade process, and this time we just captured the USB traffic. And what we found was, yep, the firmware update in a very similar way to what we've been observing over USB HID is actually also done over Bluetooth Classic with the RFCOMM protocol. So yeah, we were able to confirm that the race protocol uses the RFCOMM profile as a transport. So RFCOMM is just one of the ways you can communicate over Bluetooth Classic, and RFCOMM has channels. They are identified by channel numbers, and you can identify what protocols a channel can be using the SDP protocol, and there you can basically get like a mapping of UUIDs to channel numbers. And we found that these UUIDs are vendor specific. So each vendor that uses an Airoha chip had like a different UUID for this channel. However, we found that for most of them, it's just channel number 21. So in this case, you could use it. Then we extended our tool. We built in like a nice progress bar, and we also taught it to speak Bluetooth. We cleaned it up a bit, and for the Bluetooth part, we used the Google Bumble library, which is a pretty cool library. It's essentially just a Bluetooth host stack written entirely in Python. So it's completely separate from your operating system's Bluetooth stack. It works completely independently, so you don't have any like blues issues like you have on Linux oftentimes. And you can just plug in a Bluetooth dongle and connect the Google Bumble library to it. So we built this tool. We connected to our headphones. We ran our tool, we were able to successfully dump the flash contents of these headphones, and we were very happy and very pleased to have these results. And then we thought about it for a minute. So as I said, Bumble is a fully featured Bluetooth stack written in Python. It's entirely separated from your host operating system's Bluetooth stack, and we never paired Bumble with our headphones, only our host operating system stack. Why does this still work? Well, it turns out pairing is not required. So essentially what this means is anyone in Bluetooth range can dump our headphones flash, just like we did. This also means that anyone in Bluetooth range can connect to our headphones and play audio or record the microphone. So that does sound bad. However, for Bluetooth Classic, there are a few caveats. Firstly, to establish a Bluetooth Classic connection, you typically need to know the device's address. If a device is not discoverable, it just doesn't broadcast its own address, basically. And what you can do is you can buy one of these Bluetooth sniffing devices, like the Ubertooth One, which is about $100, and it can basically find Bluetooth devices and their addresses. This works pretty well, and the great thing here in this case is that we're using Bluetooth audio, and Bluetooth audio requires a lot of packets to be transmitted over the air, so there's a lot of packet data that the Ubertooth can use to identify devices, and we tested this. It takes just a few seconds to identify and find the Bluetooth address of a pair of headphones that's currently playing music. So it's not that bad, but yeah, it's just a prerequisite for this. And some of these devices will only accept one connection at a time. So in summary, you need to find the address of the device you want to attack, and audio might drop when you attack, so the person who has these headphones on and is listening to music will notice that something happens. But to be honest, have you ever had like audio drop on your headphones and thought, well, someone is hacking me? Mostly people are like, stupid Bluetooth, it doesn't work, and then just, yes, restart the device. But we were wondering, can we make this any cooler? And we remembered, well, yeah, there's this other kind of Bluetooth, Bluetooth Low Energy. And Bluetooth Low Energy works a bit different than Bluetooth Classic. Like on a radio level, it's very similar. There are a few other things, but from a concept, it's based a lot on advertisements. So devices can advertise themselves and services they support, and just spread out data they want to advertise, which basically means we can scan for advertisements, and we don't necessarily need to know addresses to recognize devices. Most BLE devices typically use the GATT protocol, and modern headphones mostly use it for things like model name, version name, device name, or the battery level, like here in this case, for example. So we were wondering, can we also dump flash with BLE? And the answer is yes. We again extended our toolkit, and dumping flash worked there. It was a bit slower, but yeah, it also works. So the race protocol is also available via GATT. Like just for summary or general information about GATT, GATT basically has services. These services can have different characteristics, and you can read from a characteristic, you can write to a characteristic, and you can subscribe to one. And these services and characteristics have UUIDs, and they can be discovered. And in this case, we found that there are some vendors that have like a custom UUID, but mostly it's just one got service UUID for the race protocol that you could identify. So looking back, same slide as before basically, we didn't have to pay here either. That means we can discover these headphones via their advertisements, we can connect to the headphones, and then just read and write from a GET characteristic and use the race protocol. So, to summarize, we know that the protocol is available without authentication via BLE and Bluetooth Classic. We can scan for vulnerable devices, and we can use it to dump flash. What else could we do with this protocol? So we did some reverse engineering. We found that there are quite a lot of, there seem to be a lot of command codes, command IDs, and we didn't look into all of them, but we tried to find a few that are interesting to us. And I guess one of the other very interesting ones is read and write RAM. So there is one command that allows to read and write bytewise from like a virtual address for, I don't know what the exact reason for this command here is, but it works basically as a RAM read. Obviously, you read and write flash. There are some firmware update operations that we didn't look that much into. There's like, you have to start the firmware update process, and then you have to write something somewhere and then confirm, but we don't know how exactly it works. There's a functionality to get Bluetooth link keys, and I'm going to talk about this a bit more later. There's also command to get the Bluetooth Classic address. We can read out a build version to identify different versions and device models. And yeah, as I said, a ton of other stuff that we just didn't really look into. And one thing I want to mention here is not every device seems to support all of these functions. So yeah, some of them are just not available for some of the devices. Now the question is, obviously this looks bad, but how bad is it exactly? And we're trying something stupid here. We're trying to do Bluetooth live demos, so hopefully this works. Okay, so this is the tool I've just shown a few screenshots of, and here we have our victim Julian. He currently has one of the headphones and he's listening to music. And so, as I mentioned before, there's one command that allows us to read out the build version. And I told the tool here to use Bumble GAT. So in this case, it means it uses the Bumble library and Bluetooth Low Energy. And I'm giving it the build version read command. And let's see. Sometimes I have a dongle that's not, okay, it works. And there we have the build version. It just gives out like a timestamp of when the firmware was built, and it just helps to identify different devices. And it will be helpful in the next command, which we called, media info. So that's Bluetooth hacking. So this will try to. So first, it identifies the version because it needs like specific addresses, and it just told me what Julian is listening to, which is a great album, by the way. And so we needed to know which version we have, just because there are like some hard-coded pointers here in our functionality, so it's not that sophisticated, but it works pretty reliably. One other thing we can do is we can read out the Bluetooth Classic address, so that means we don't have to do like all the Ubertooth sniffing stuff, and we can just get the classic address and then talk to the device via RFCOMM. So in this case, I'm using a command we call dump partition. As I mentioned, we can read different parts of the flash, and we found that there was like a partition table at the beginning, and there are like bootloader stuff and OTA update stuff and whatever. But there's one NVDM partition that's very interesting to us, and so now we're basically just dumping flash via Bluetooth Classic. It's pretty fast, but it's also not that pretty large block. So I just stored that into a temp directory, and so there was a lot of like reverse engineering into the format of this NVDM partition, and it's all a lot of details, but that's not important in this case. What's really important here is that this NVDM partition contains something like a connection table, and this connection table contains names of devices that the headphones were connected to, the Bluetooth address of devices that were connected to, and the link key. So in this case, you can see the device name is just underscore. Julian's phone is called underscore. You can see the device address, and you can see the link key of the Bluetooth connection these two have. And these are going to become important later on. Interesting. Okay, so now we don't need the pre-recorded videos because it worked. That's very good. Okay, to summarize a bit, so with the RAM write stuff, we can also run code, and we tried this a bit, but we didn't like do a lot of code injection to do a lot of cool stuff because it's exhausting to do all that, and we didn't really see a reason. You can eavesdrop, so if you can connect to a device, you could just turn on the microphone and listen to the microphone. We can extract data, and we can extract the link keys. And there will be some point where people are going to start saying, well, I don't care about my headphones. I don't care if anyone can see that I'm listening to Taylor Swift. It's just the music I'm listening to. And that's why we were wondering, is there anything else we can do? And with this link key, or with these link keys that we can extract, we can basically start to change the scope of what we can do with the attack. And that's something that doesn't just apply to this, but would basically apply to any Bluetooth device where you can read from flash or read from like a configuration partition. So if you remember this love relationship that I was talking about before, we have a cryptographic bond between the headphones and the smartphone. And if we know the device address of the headphones, if we know the Bluetooth device address of the smartphone, and if we know the link key of this connection, which is all that we were able to just extract using these demos, then we can just become the headphones. We can essentially impersonate them. So we change our Bluetooth address to the address of the headphones, we put the link key into our Bluetooth stack, and then we can just connect. So the question is, what can we do with that? And so there's basically the hands-free profile that is used by headphones and also some cars. And this profile has a few capabilities related to like calling and audio. So firstly, you have like call control. That means you can answer, reject calls, you can dial a number, you can also redial the last number that was dialed. You can do audio routing, so send audio via the headphones or set it so that the audio is routed via the smartphone. You can get caller information access, so if someone calls, you can read out the caller ID, you can get signal strength. On Android, you can also query like the subscriber number of the device, so you can just, as a headphone, tell the smartphone, hey, give me your phone number. It doesn't work on iOS, which is interesting. And another interesting thing is you can use voice assistants, so you can trigger Siri or Google Assistant. There are also some non-standard commands to access the phone book. We only tried this on Android, and there it really depends on whether you answer the prompt when you first pair them with yes, where it asks you, do you want to share the contacts with these headphones? So if you don't, then that's not possible. But let's have a look at what is possible. So let's do a second live demo and hope that this one works. Need the different dongle. Okay. So I did prepare quite some parts of the steps because it would just take a lot of time. So step number 1 would be to change the Bluetooth address of my dongle here to the Bluetooth address of these headphones, so that that they can impersonate them. There's a lot of warnings and errors, but it still works. And then I need to inject the link key that I just extracted into my Bluetooth stack. And here I'm using BT stack, which is basically like an open source Bluetooth stack. So it's not Bumble, but BT stack in this case, because BT stack is also the tool I'm using to connect to the smartphone. So now we have Julian here. I just extracted the link key between that is shared between his headphones and his phone. And now I'm trying to impersonate his headphones and connecting to his phone. Okay, so now I basically have a connection, and now I can do HFP profile things. As I mentioned before, this is implemented by BT Stack, so we didn't really have to do a lot of things. One thing we could do would be to do Command I, which is dial hacker. The problem is we can't do that here because we don't have SIM cards that work here, so that's one of the demos we can't do here. But something else that's interesting is that we can talk to Siri, and let's see if that works. What time is it?
It's 16:39.
Okay, that's cool, but that's not that interesting because you know what time it is. What's more interesting would be something like this. Send a message to my boss.
What would you like to say to my boss?
I quit.
It says, I quit. Send it.
Yes, send it.
Done.
So, in this case, this is not his boss's phone, but mine. But here I just got the text, I quit. Okay, obviously this only works if you have Siri enabled on your phone, but the default setting on iOS, for example, is that Siri also works in the lock screen. So, okay, let's quickly get back to affected devices. I mentioned before we went on a search to try to identify other devices that we could do this attack on, and it turns out it's not the easiest problem to find out which headphones use which SoCs, and I just wanted to share a few things that we did. So obviously the first thing we did was just Google it, and there are a few results. So if you just Google headphones that use Airoha chips, there are some news articles that mention like a business relationship between them, and here in this case we had like Sony device that uses an Airoha chip, which was part of the information. But something really cool I wanted to mention here, and a shout out to 52audio.com. This is basically like a audio-specific teardown website, and they have extremely awesome teardowns and very, very detailed pictures. So one thing we did there, we just put in Airoha into the search, and then you get pictures like this. It's really, the beamer doesn't, the presenter doesn't do its justice. It's really high-res picture. And it's very, very helpful. Unfortunately, it's just for audio devices. They should do it for other devices as well, because it's, just really helpful for research. Of course, having an Airoha chip doesn't obviously mean that all the vulnerabilities are there, because it still depends on like versions and what services they have enabled and what the actual device vendor has done. But so we found that there are a ton of potentially vulnerable devices, probably something around 100, but we have no idea. But when we try to confirm stuff, to mention like the devices we know about, then we just really have to physically verify it. We have to have the device here and check our exploits. We cannot just give out a list of devices that have an Airoha chip and tell everyone they're vulnerable, because we don't know. We have to confirm it. But before I get into the list of actual vulnerable devices, we just want to do like a quick detour of the vulnerability disclosure path.
Thank you, Dennis. Yeah. So sometime in March, Dennis approached me and told me, we need to do a disclosure, but we have a problem. Because, we have vulnerabilities in chips by Airoha, and they sell it to many different vendors that produce products, and also OEMs, ODMs that are creating like devices out of the SoC, the SDK, and the respective reference designs. And these ODMs are then creating products for their customers. And basically those products are then sold to many, many people, which are basically the consumers. And we identified many vulnerabilities in those. So how do we handle this? Because obviously we don't know the consumer that actually purchased such devices. And we can only like spot check devices and find more and more and more, but we will never find all of them. So how do we address those issues? We can potentially get to the vendors that produce those devices, but we will potentially also not spot all of those. So our best guess potentially would be Airoha, but what do we also do with those ODMs? Because I think we don't even know how at the moment to identify which OEMs or ODMs are actually producing something for dedicated vendors. So that's a black spot that we didn't even cover by now, which is like from March to now. So we decided to try to our best to actually reach Airoha. And then we basically looked at the webpage and saw, okay, nice, they have a vuln disclosure program described on the website, which is telling us that they are responding in a maximum time of 3 to 5 business days, that they are releasing patches within 90 days, which is great, and that we can communicate with something like PGP or similar. So pretty good, because Dennis also wanted to hand in the findings to a conference, which was like 94 days after he talked to me. And adding up 90 days with 3 days to respond, that's basically perfect. And much work in that evening for me. So we started the disclosure with the disclosure timeline. The timeline escalated really quickly, but I think we only will have the short version here. So on March 25, we contacted Airoha with very detailed technical write-ups, so more than like 20 pages of technical proof of concepts and parts to reproduce those issues, and did not get any response, also not like after 1 month. That's why we thought, okay, how can we potentially still like get those vulnerabilities fixed, and then considered going 1 level down and trying to contact some of the vendors that are producing devices for the consumers in order to potentially use their contacts to like Airoha, because they are still buying the chips of them. So potentially they will have some contact to Airoha to potentially contact them and tell them, hey, there's vulnerabilities, please contact the researchers. So we did that. We contacted 3 of the vendors. I think at that moment we already knew of about 21 devices that were vulnerable, and choose 3 from who only 1 actually responded to our inquiry. And that was one of the vendors that used an OEM to build his device, so he also had no direct contact to Airoha. So we basically still had no contact. And we didn't really know what to do, so we waited. And after another 4 weeks, we got a mail from Airoha, which was interesting, because another vendor that we contact didn't respond to us, but sent them a message to tell them, hey, there's something going on, please get back to them. And that was out of luck, basically, because some of you know, other like researchers go full disclosure after 3 weeks of not getting an answer, and we still managed to get some after like 8 weeks. So That's late, but still better than no answer. So that's great. And then basically a very great collaboration started with Airoha, because after just 1 week, they basically released an update for the SDK to roll that out to all of their customers, which then started basically the disclosure we wanted to have like 3 days after we did the initial report. So that was really great to have that in that short time frame, and also like communicating all the time about the status. So that was really great. On June 26th, after like 90 days of the initial report, we then gave a talk at Troopers Conference in Germany and did a partial vulnerability disclosure, so left out some technical details that were like needed to reproduce the stuff, but still to like get the people in patching their devices, because we need to get attention to the consumers in the end, and there was a great chance to do that. Because already 22 days earlier, there was an SDK update released by Airoha. Then, since like June, August, vendors are releasing updates. We basically do not know of any fixing the vulnerabilities by now, but still we don't have that much time in actually checking for like 21 devices. Yeah, so this actually takes a little bit longer than we expected to be. Yeah, and of course today we are giving this presentation here. So our next plan is to release some more details, basically doing full disclosure at the end of the year, and to also like roll out some tool that helps people finding out whether their device is affected or not, because we did not, as giving this to people enables them in actually getting very great access to that device and potentially doing like weaponizing that. Yeah, also there were like CVEs released on August 4th, I think, in a security bulletin by Airoha, which we really appreciate. And yeah, there is the security bulletin basically, which also names us, so thanks for that. And yeah, now I think we can answer the question, what are the vulnerable devices, Dennis?
Yeah, kind of. So this is basically the list of devices that we know about. And that's really just what we were able to confirm. So if a vendor's on here, it doesn't mean all of their products are affected. But if there's this one device, it doesn't mean that it's just this one. So it's not really exhaustive. We bought a few of these devices. We asked a few of our friends and colleagues whether we could play around with their devices. We didn't brick any of the devices, so yeah, that's good. Not every product is affected in the same way, and I want to make this example with Jabra at the top, for example. So they disabled GATT for some reason, but that means that the discoverability part is gone, and it also means that it just makes it more difficult to exploit. And they also fixed the classic pairing issue. So essentially, it's really, really hard to attack them, and they're not like a real target anymore just by, for whatever reason, they just fix it in their devices. They also are the only vendor to go public and talk about other of their devices that are vulnerable. So they, like, somewhere on the internet, they wrote which other devices they think are affected. That was pretty cool, so they seem to be pretty open about it. And yeah, some of the devices, like some of the Sony devices, they filter some of the protocol messages. So there are a few Sony devices where you cannot write and read RAM, which also makes this a bit less severe. Since we did like the first disclosure and had like the blog post, some vendors did release updates. None of them mentioned the CVEs or anything about the vulnerabilities. So we just have to assume that they didn't fix. If they don't talk about it, but we just didn't have a lot of time to check all of these updates. So as of now, we don't really know if anything's fixed. And yeah, just one other thing: Sony has been releasing like updates for different devices, and it's like seems to be like a partial rollout. They fixed another vulnerability where the fix also like mitigates this classic pairing thing. So yeah. Just something of note. So, well, what now?
Yeah, so basically, as told, we are releasing more technical details until the end of the year, or at the end of the year. We expect more firmware updates to be coming, and that users are basically applying those so that the situation changes a little bit. that we are basically releasing the tools at the end of the year, or in the position of doing so. We are basically expecting from vendors that sell devices for more than 500 bucks that they are doing some basic security assessments on those devices, because I think we would expect that as users of such devices that they also include that. So please do that if you're a manufacturer. And make sure that you read your disclosure mails, because there may be something waiting for you for 2 months at the moment. And yeah, please offer alternative ways then in contacting you besides bug bounty programs, because sometimes we cannot use those, and you potentially want to receive the mails we are handing in. Yeah, and as a user, please update your headphones if you see that there is an update. And if you don't know whether there is an update, please have a look at it regularly, because there will be some update, very probably. Yeah, so, and if you think that you're vulnerable, please use wired headphones, or in addition to not using them, remove the existing pairing, because if someone already extracted your link keys, it doesn't matter if you're not using your device anymore. He still can connect, you know? All right. So only a few closing remarks. Smartphones are getting more secure. Peripherals become more interesting for attackers. So that's something worth having a look at. And remember that that also will cause people in actually researching for vulnerabilities in those devices in order to get some privilege on the smartphones. So that will be something that will change in the future. Thank you very much.
Okay, and let's thank again for Dennis and Julian for their presentation.